Hey, 4-Pack fans. We appreciate the support y'all have given us so far, and we want to give back. Beginning with this episode, we're running a giveaway for the month of July. Give us a subscribe on YouTube and comment Hot Take Summer on this or any video we post this month, and you'll be able to win $25 from one of us on CashApp. Multiple comments do not equal multiple entries, but if you guys want to stop in and chat, we won't stop you. All right. Welcome in, boys, to the Breakout player episode. I've been personally looking forward to this one for a while. I love talking about breakout players, trying to identify those guys who are sort of your league winners on a year in year out basis. Yeah. For anyone who is just joining us for the first time, Matt Vitale, Frankie Santiago, my name's Ian Power, and we've all prepared a list of 4 players each who we think stand the best chance in our minds of not only just returning value in your drafts, but going above and beyond for your fantasy teams to really help you bring home that ship.
Yeah, players ready to take that next step.
Oh, yeah. To launch themselves into fantasy stardom. Before we get started, if you like what we're bringing to the table, if you want to hear more of our lovely voices, you can subscribe to us on YouTube, hit that notification bell so that way you're always up to date when a new episode drops. We are currently releasing episodes on Mondays and Thursdays. And follow us on Twitter at the Fantasy 4-Pack, Fantasy 4-Pack _ Ian, the Foon, and Senpai Koala for our own personal musings on fantasy football and life in general. Yeah, or for the Fantasy 4-Pack, mostly just fantasy football.
Also, on another note, we are drinking a notch because it is the Thursday show, so it is the last day of show of the week.
Yeah, I was getting to that, Frankie. But
Raw Power. It's a New England Small IPA. Totally crushable and drinkable.
And it has a cat on the can, so you know that it's the most powerful of IPAs. Yeah. The house cat often is synonymous with raw strength, and it's like the gorilla, the mountain lion, the house cat.
Actually, I'm curious. Vitali, not really liking IPAs a lot. How do you feel about this one?
I think it's pretty drinkable.
It's not the worst. I can get through them. But I'll give it my not a fan of IPAs seal of approval.
That's not too bad.
Progress.
Yeah.
So, before we launch into the breakout players, some quick news bits that I wanted to touch on. Eagles re-signed Jason Peters. I think it's a great signing. I mean, he's obviously a consummate pro. He's been in the league forever.
Yeah.
And with Brooks out for the season, like that can only mean good things for Sanders. Even if he's not as good as Brandon Brooks, it's still better to have someone like that on the line than to have whoever they were going to have filling in for him.
Yeah, like I said when we talked about Sanders a few episodes ago, I think they will work to gel that line in the absence. Like I said, I think an injury midsummer is way better than it happening in preseason or game one for run blocking and pass blocking.
You never want to lose a dude like that, but if you have to, you want to lose him early enough so that you can find a replacement.
Exactly.
Kenny Stills, this is a little bit of a sad one, was arrested and is facing felony charges. I'm not really going to speak to the situation because it seems kind of complicated, but I think it's a slight bump to Texans receivers if he misses time because of this, but aside from that. And then the biggest news, Mr. Derrick Henry finalized a 4-year, $50 million deal with the Titans, 25.5 guaranteed.
Securing the bag.
Get that money.
They showed Henry that they love him and they want him there until the wheels fall off.
They're
Love that money.
They're gonna run him into the ground until his legs break.
I mean, for $50 million, I would let the Titans run me into the ground. So
now, one thing when I saw that, do you think this might actually cause them to lighten Henry's load, knowing they're going to have him for 4 years and they don't want to run him into the ground this year?
No.
I think eventually they'll run him into the ground. This year, maybe.
I think the Titans understand how running backs work, and this is just to make sure that Henry is happy and wants to play for them. He was the reason they were successful last year. The offense flows around him. You want to keep players like that happy. So I love it. Happy for Derrick Henry. Glad we're going to be able to rely on him this season. He's not going to go into a potential holdout situation like Dalvin.
Yeah.
All right. Any other news that you guys can think of that I missed?
Nothing on my end.
Let's grip it and rip it.
Okay. So just so everyone knows what we consider a breakout, we're mostly looking at players on the younger side. So, players with a long career ahead of them, hopefully, that haven't hit their ceiling yet. So they still have a lot of room to improve in the league. So, we're not going to be talking about Robert Woods or Rob Gronkowski. They've already peaked. You know what you're getting from them. And while they could be good players for your team, you're basically drafting them for the consistent production they give. These are players that we're going to be talking about who, while they are going to give you consistent production, they could give you so much more than what the projections have them slated for.
Yeah, like we wouldn't be talking about a guy like David Johnson, who you could see as a bounce back candidate. It's more the avenue we would talk about him because he's already peaked and been a running back one in his time. So
Yeah.
we can still be on the hype train for him, but he's not exactly what we're looking at for breakout. Breakouts are, like I said, young guys who are ready to take that next step.
Right, and they haven't hit stardom yet.
Disclaimer: I am on Team Hype Train David Johnson this year. It's just gonna
I mean,
throw it out there.
Toot.
sure, I
long
can
as
I
the
can
price
get on
stays
board
low.
that. I can get on board that train. I like where he's going.
As long as the ticket's cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, don't increase that cost, and I'm happy to pick him up in the fifth or fourth round.
Never mind, I'm not on Hype Train David Johnson this year.
Oh.
I'm,
Okay, that was a short train ride, Frankie.
yep. I'm
All right, well, for taking us on that wild journey there, why don't you lead us off today? Who's your first breakout player?
Well, my first guy is a guy I liked a lot last year, and unfortunately, I didn't get him in a lot of leagues. Mr. Josh Jacobs.
Sure.
I think what he did on, particularly the Oakland Raiders, because that's the only team he's played for.
Oh.
I was unaware. I thought he was a seasoned vet.
Not necessarily most winning of teams in the most recent years, but he was able to turn in 1,100 yards last year. So yeah, 1,150. I think the main problem he saw last year was he didn't turn a lot of those into touchdowns, and I think that with the additions the Raiders have made this year, and just like obviously Jacobs developing as a running back over the course of the offseason and through the season, I think that I can see him, maybe them using him more at the goal line. Last year he had 242 attempts. Next closest person was DeAndre Washington, who had 108. They clearly want to use Jacobs. They showed that last year. If he can develop into that goal line guy as well as their three-down guy, I don't see why he can't increase that touchdown volume and therefore hit that RB1 spot. He could potentially blow up big this year.
Yeah, Gruden is that old school style head coach where he wants to play some smash football. He believes in the three-down back, which has not been the theme in recent years. But, you also got to feel good about him when you look at him being graded as the number 2 overall fantasy running back behind Chubb per PFF. So those things are definitely a positive in his cap. I'm not a huge fan that he has what they grade out as the worst running back schedule in the league. I'm also just not sure how that team's going to click. I feel like I want bits of it, but my big thing for why I'm off the Josh Jacobs train is we know that to have a top runner, you need to be on usually a top half offense. I don't see them getting anywhere close to that.
I actually agree with you. I've thought a lot about Josh Jacobs over the course of the offseason, and while he's not someone I would be upset to get, because I do think you're getting a bit of guaranteed volume with Jacobs that you don't necessarily get, because there isn't really no one else there who is a real threat to his carries. He was drafted 24th overall. You don't use a first-round draft pick. It's the same argument people have with CEH. You don't use a first-round draft pick on a running back unless you plan on using that running back. The issues I have with Josh Jacobs are, like you said, the Raiders are not a good offense, and they didn't really take any steps to fix that this year. Henry Ruggs is going to help them a little bit, but they still have a meh offensive line. They still have Derek Carr back there. Gruden still thinks he's coaching in the 90s. I don't see that offense being dynamic enough to make Jacobs really work for fantasy. And then he's also not a pass-catching running back. He can, but they don't use him in that way.
Yeah.
And they showed that a lot last year. They have a very spread out offense. It's very confusing target tree because there's how many people they have involved. And that's the other reason that I don't think that Jacobs really has that breakout ceiling this year, is because I just don't see him being able to smash through that glass ceiling without getting the passing volume, because he's not going to be used like Derrick Henry was, and that's the only way someone who isn't getting passing volume can really rise to fantasy stardom.
Yeah, they've shown that they want to throw to running backs using Jalen Richard, not him.
Yeah.
And those other guys, as much as I believe that he has just clearing away more talent than those guys, they still keep wanting to use Jalen Richard and these other guys, and then they went and spent two high picks on wide receivers, who I think is a good thing, but it doesn't. I don't think it fits the coach enough, and I don't think those two guys will put enough impact into this season that it will actually help Josh Jacobs. Next year, maybe.
So, okay, so last question to you about Josh Jacobs.
Sure.
So similar to what running back I like to compare him to is Aaron Jones, because Aaron Jones is kind of in that similar situation with Jamal Williams. Do you think that we could see the trend away from Jalen Richard in the future? I know it was Jacobs' rookie year last year, so I mean, obviously he needs time to get used to the NFL and used to the system. Do you think we could see a similar trend with Jalen Richard and Josh Jacobs?
The difference was that Jacobs is already not catching balls, whereas Aaron Jones was already in the receiving role. He was losing running touches to Jamal Williams. It's easier to consolidate those than it is to consolidate passing volume. They've all because, and say what you will about Jalen Richard, I believe that Jalen Richard is the better passing back than a receiving back than Josh Jacobs. So I don't see them going away from him unless he leaves the team.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from Gruden. I know, as a Pats fan, we've heard before that Belichick hates guys that are one-trick ponies because he hates sending a running back out there, and everyone knows, well, if he's in the game, he's either running or blocking. He likes those guys who can confuse the defense. Is he going to actually go out for a pass? Like I said, I think he could do it. I don't think he's untalented in that area, but I think it's just the Gruden's coaching style is not conducive to that, and they don't have that type of Tennessee offense that's going to feed him, 300 carries a season to push him even in getting close to a top 3 back. And we've seen in recent years, if you want to be a top back, you have to get at least 300-400 yards through the air.
Yeah, you have to be getting the passing volume.
Exactly.
Right, so you don't
let's
like Josh
let's
Jacobs.
go on to the next. Let's go on to the next running back here. Someone else who's being drafted in the second round. I know you're looking at Miles Sanders as a guy who could be a strong breakout candidate this year.
Yeah. One, I love that any clip. So you don't like him.
I was going to transition to you guys.
Yeah, but I actually think it was a good spot to transition because, like I said, to be a top guy, you need to catch balls, and we saw Miles Sanders has that passing talent. The big question mark with him has always been, it's Doug Peterson, and he doesn't like to use one running back. He loves himself a committee. Well, when you look back at who he had for running backs in the past few years, I don't blame him. Some studs like LeGarrette Blunt Force Trauma, Ryan Matthews.
Show ponies, unicorns. Where's the beef?
Exactly. I love me some Blunt Force Trauma, but we all know he's not. He's not Saquon Barkley. So when you got guys like that, you've got to.
But Vitelli, he had 15 touchdowns with the Patriots.
Yes, with the Patriots. Keyword. So when you look at all these guys, and they spent a second-round pick on him, and then in 11 games, he broke Doug Peterson's single running back carry record. I know it's not a real record in the record books, but he eclipsed that 179 carry mark. And Doug Peterson, like I said, he's showing a trending towards wanting to believe in him. We were all worried through the offseason. Jordan Howard's there. He's gone now. Are they going to sign Carlos Hyde or another veteran running back? They haven't yet. I know they're looking at some of the other guys out there, Shady McCoy or Devonta Freeman. And the beat reporters are saying that they don't need it. They haven't signed him yet, and there's nothing holding them back from doing so. It looks like they're more interested in solidifying their line and giving the lion's share to Miles Sanders. I mean, Boston Scott's here, and I think they've found a nice change of pace guy to take some of the load off of him. But the Eagles' offense, they love to throw. He can catch. And I just think that the Eagles' offense, especially if the injuries come back up again, he's on the younger side. I would guess that he'd probably be one of the last few guys to get injured. So, like I said, all these things spelled together, when you look at a guy who already eclipsed 1,000 yards, he had just shy of 400 yards receiving last year. The problem was he wasn't getting in the end zone, and he had a few fumbles last year, and he had a small injury. But I think projecting forward, we can easily see him eclipsing 1,000 again, no problem. Getting at least into the 220s for carries, that's just me being conservative on that. And probably eclipsing, 400, 500 yards through the air. I could see him as being basically a discount Alvin Kamara. And as far as his ceiling, to me, I could see him easily slipping into that, RB5, RB6 slot if everything goes his way.
Well, and you can be successful as a running back with 220 plus yards. I mean, if you just give him like 4.8 yards per carry, I said the math real fast, that still comes out to 1,056 yards. So like that's a perfectly respectable season, especially if you are getting that passing volume. I'm with you on this one. I've been back and forth on Sanders all off season. I like the fact that they signed Peters back. I like they don't have another running back yet because that was a big detractor for me as the offseason went along. I was like waiting for the shoe to drop. Like, all right, who's the next guy going to be? And we know the Eagles were in on Carlos Hyde and they lost him. I'm starting to believe, just as the summer goes along and nothing happens, that Doug Peterson just doesn't really like any of the other guys, and that he's basically resigned to the fact that he's going to go into the season with just Miles Sanders and Boston Scott. I as of July 15th, 2020, 8:33 p.m., I am agreeing with you about his ceiling. Obviously, if news comes out in the future that, they sign Marshawn Lynch or somebody, and, Devonta Freeman comes off the street and joins them, I will change my take. But as of right now, I do really like Sanders' ceiling, and I love his price point too, because he is going behind guys like Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, Kenyon Drake. Whereas I feel like he has a similar ceiling to a lot of these guys, but you're getting him 6 picks later. Mm-hmm. Frank, any thoughts?
Oh, I agree with literally everything you just said.
Yeah, I mean, you
pretty much just nailed everything that I was going to say. It's like the main worry I have is like I just don't like committees. And
yeah.
Him being the only guy in town is more appealing to me. Like you said, they lost on Carlos Hyde. There hasn't been any news about them. Like looking into Devonta Freeman, who I think is personally just going to stay in Atlanta, as far as like if he's the backup, whatever.
Yeah.
But to speak more to your point, Doug Peterson.
You don't want to trust him. It's not a gross name. It's a gross name to have when you're trying to tie yourself to a high value running back.
He's a good coach, but he does not like your fantasy team.
It's like drafting a high running back on the Patriots.
He's basically a discount Bill Belichick in the fact that it's like, oh,
or Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah,
just any of these like good NFL coaches who just do not care about your fantasy roster.
Yeah.
Oh, you went on rush for you almost broke the single game rushing record and scored 4 touchdowns. All right, we're going with Joe Schmo from Section 32A.
Rest in peace, Jonas Gray.
All right, well, I'm gonna wrap up the first group of 3 players we're talking about with another second round player, but I'm going wide receiver with mine. A guy that I know that we're all a big fan of, excited to see what he can do this year, Mr. Kenny Golladay. I'm just going to start off by talking about his season last year, just so everyone can really see the full picture. 2019, 116 targets, 65 receptions, 11 touchdowns, and only a 56% catch rate, but he did have a consistently high ADOT, so average depth of target. 12.14 in 2018, 14.6 in 2019. So you love how far down the field he's getting targeted. The low catch percentage hasn't really been entirely Kenny's fault. I mean, he only had 4 drops in 2018 and 6 drops in 2019. I'm leaving out 2017 because he didn't really play a full. That was his rookie year. He didn't play a full complement of games that year.
Mm-hmm.
So he hasn't had a case of the dropsies. Pretty sure-handed. We know he's a good route runner, very skilled receiver. He can go up and fight for those one-on-ones. The biggest issue that really plagued him last season, because he was on a roll when Stafford was there and was putting up that awesome pace to start the season. 8 games, he had almost 2,500 yards. David Blow and Jeff Driscoll combined for a passer rating of 69.8. through the final 8 weeks of the season. So, the weeks where Stafford was injured. That came in as 29th in the NFL. I think that's going to affect a wide receiver just a little bit. If your quarterbacks are combining for the third worst quarterback in the NFL, you're not going to have a fun time. And Kenny Golladay owners got to have that stress down the stretch as they were just sitting there looking at his stat line in the third quarter. And it was like 2 for 32, and you're like, just catch one long ball, just one, and he would generally come through for them because he was a very consistent receiver. He did have those 11 touchdowns, but I'm looking forward to getting more of Stafford, who through his games when he was still uninjured with the team, Detroit's passer rating was 106, or 5th best in the NFL. Also, throughout last season, Detroit QBs had a passer rating of 105.2 when targeting Kenny Golladay, so he did show that he is kind of quarterback proof, because even the David Blows of the world were able to be effective when throwing at him. Not 100% of the time, but effective when throwing at him. So I love his floor. Because even if Stafford gets hurt again, because he has had some issues with injuries in the past, we can rely on Kenny to put up a solid floor for us. And I think his ceiling is easily top 3 wide receivers, just because he's got that talent. He's in an offense that loves to throw, and the Lions are bad, so they're going to be throwing a lot. ECR currently has him as wide receiver 7. The public agrees. I could see you drafting him as high as wide receiver 5. I could see an argument for you taking him ahead of Godwin and Hopkins. I have him this season with 125 targets, 72 catches, 1,208 yards, and 11 touchdowns.
Yeah, a lot of that I do agree with. He feels like a safe second round guy,
but safe with high ceiling, which is hard to find.
Right, but for me, there's just he's one of those players. I want to say he's Chris Godwin of last year. And for that reason, it makes me want more of him because I missed the train on Godwin last year.
Yep.
Yeah. Believing he's not that sexy Julio Jones, Odell Beckham name.
His name's Kenny.
Yeah, his name's Kenny Golladay. I mean, but the other thing when I actually dug into the stats for him is, I wonder, is it more was his last year more saved due to the fact that he had a high ADOT and he had 11 touchdowns? And could the crater actually be lower if Blow comes back out to play and he's not getting those touchdowns? Like I said, we already saw what happened, so I would hope that it's going to happen again, but I doubt he's going to be first in receiving touchdowns again. I would hope for him to reproduce something like that with Matt Stafford, 8-9 touchdowns. But with him, I feel he's a little bit too close to what I would put as his ceiling. For me, 6 and 7 is close to what I would put him at, and I personally don't think you're getting much of a bargain with him, but I also don't think he's a bad player by any means. So I just don't know if he's gonna.
I actually wouldn't really count him as a bargain right now. I have him as just basically good value. You're getting what you're drafting, more or less. I would love to get him middle of the third, like he's gone in years past, but he's end of the second this year.
Yeah, he's at his Kenny Blue Book value.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I more just like the fact that I kind of know what his floor is. He's going to be in that range again, and his ceiling is the moon. Let's kick it back over to Frankie, who's talking about another wide receiver a few rounds back. A.J. Brown, building on that fantastic season last year.
Well, fantastic end of season. And I was actually just going back to...
Well, to be fair, I don't really know if you can count Marcus Mariota as a professional quarterback, so I think we can just wipe the slate clean on the first part of the year, but...
Yeah, so if you look at A.J. Brown, over the last, I think it was 6 games, it was 6... So over his last 6 games, over 100 yards in every game. A touchdown in 4 of the 6.
Yep.
Which is the only ones he didn't score touchdowns in were the under 100-yard games.
Right.
Getting him substantially cheaper than Kenny Golladay. He's going around, I believe, let me double check.
He's 4th round ADP last time I checked.
He is the wide receiver 12, and he is in the 4th round. You are correct. Honestly, I would feel more comfortable. I mean, I'm very bullish on A.J. Brown. I think that what we saw at the end of last season is kind of only the beginning for him. I think his biggest problem, I will say, though, just to acknowledge, is that Tannehill's throwing the ball 23 times a game or 26 times a game.
Right.
And the Titans, if they get ahead early, they're just going to run Henry into the ground. But to come back to why I'm very bullish on him is in those last 6 games, you saw while throwing the ball as little as Tannehill is in game managing like he is with Derrick Henry, you're still getting 100-yard games. And I mean, so if you look at the averages here, he's got 27 yards per target, 21 yards per target, 17 yards per target.
You saw he was able to be very efficient on a limited amount of targets.
Yeah. It's just I think that while he has that
Words, Frankie.
to articulate here a little bit more.
Thank you.
I think that for the price you're getting him at, his ceiling, I'm not going to say he can be the wide receiver 1. Probably, I would put him at top 5, top 3 at the absolute highest. Because
I think that's a very bullish ceiling for someone who's not going to be getting high passing volume. But I like the enthusiasm.
It's more that I like the efficiency of what he's doing with that low passing volume.
I could easily see him finishing the year as like a top 7 wide receiver. I think he needs to get more passes to really break into like that top 5 range.
I think that's his biggest problem. Is that, but that's also the.
He basically is like the anti-Allen Robinson, where he's highly efficient, less carries or less targets, but he makes it work with a low volume. So as long as he is making people miss and breaking tackles and getting in the end zone, you're gonna love what he does. And he's a huge guy, so he's well suited to do that role. Whereas like Allen Robinson, the guy who gets 140 targets and catches 120 of them, and you just win on his passing volume. So like his path to success is his efficiency.
Yeah, I think like I said before, I think his biggest detractor and benefactor is the fact that Tannehill's a good game manager, but also he doesn't throw the ball a lot. And on another note, Derrick Henry is on that team as well, so it's like they're going to run him into the ground if they get any kind of lead.
I want to open the floor for Vitaly to make a counterpoint.
Yeah, just because
I
am the A.J. Brown curmudgeon.
Get off my porch.
Exactly. So it's funny looking at him that this is one of your guys, because when I get to my final guy, it's going to be a lot of the same points, but I'm getting this guy vastly cheaper. But when I look at him, like I said, when you look at a guy who got targeted the 44th most in the league for wide receivers, but yet he's producing is a mid wide receiver 2. I just feel like there's too much that went right that season. Like I said, I have the Titans taking a step back. I don't think Derrick Henry is going to be as productive. I still think he's going to be a running back 1. I just think he's going to be on the lower side.
We get it, Vitaly. You're Chicken Little over there saying the sky's falling about the Titans.
Oh, I'm sorry that he's done. He did it once at the end of the year. He did it with Ryan Tannehill, who I've seen in the AFC East not be the guy for years. Granted, he was on the Dolphins, but
I think that was a big part of it.
With our favorite head coach in the world, Adam Gase.
Right. So it all looks to me like he's an expensive guy that we don't know enough for me to buy in, at least. Like I said, when I look at Kenny G, that's my hesitation with Kenny G was he was doing a lot with a little.
At least he has the sample size.
He has the pedigree. He has a quarterback I believe in. He has a team that wants to throw. A.J. Brown is a discount version of Kenny G, but we know what Kenny G is, and we know what the Lions are. We know what the tight ends are. We don't really know what A.J. is because he's only seen it for half a season.
Sure. No, and honestly, because I'm trying to target Kenny G this year, I likely wouldn't draft both of them because I agree they are a very similar player profile.
Well, if I get one, I'm probably not getting it. Because, you can, in theory, get both of them, but
You absolutely can.
I
Definitely.
well, it's first 4 rounds.
They're going completely different rounds.
Yeah, it's Adrian. He's going back of the 3rd, early 4th. I mean, if it happens, it happens.
I wouldn't call him a value, but I do think he is probably in line for a good season.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be mad if I got him.
Yeah, he's not a value. He's definitely.
People are kind of drafting him at what his ceiling probably is going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to kick it back over to Vitaly here for another mid-round player, a guy that I'm not personally very high on, David Montgomery.
Yeah. So he was a guy I was kind of out on. I owned him last year, and it definitely you felt that 3.7 yards per carry last year, and you just
If you know any Bears that weren't named Allen Robinson last year, you were upset.
I was very happy with Allen Robinson last year.
yeah, like I said, he wasn't a fun guy. He does not have a sexy name, but what I do love is they had all those inefficiencies at running back, and yet they did not address that by going to get another guy. They believed in their running back. They still have Tariq Cohen, but we know he's not actually a running back. He just happens to have the RB tag.
He's more like a slot wide receiver that plays out of the backfield.
Right, and I think he does his job very well. But when I look at him, he's a guy who is just getting just carries are getting dumped on this guy. He could easily have 265 carries next year, and that's about where I'm pegging him.
Are you pegging him?
Yeah. But when I look at like everything about him, it just looked like Mitch Trubisky's failings as a quarterback, his turnovers, his lack of production, everything. They could just stack the box against him. So they went out and they did, instead of fixing the running back, they went out and fixed the quarterback by going and getting Foles, he's nothing special, but Matt Nagy is very comfortable with him, so he can pick up Matt Nagy's offense quite quickly. So if they end up swapping over to him, I think he's a guy who can game manage just fine, like a Tannehill.
I would say at the very least, he's probably a better game manager.
Yeah, he's a game manager. He can take care of the ball, sling it when he needs to, but he can make a defense actually respect the passing game, whereas Trubisky couldn't. Their defense was on the field so much, and I think that hurt the defense as well. So when you look back at him, he had 3.7 yards per carry, and he was just getting stuffed in the box all year. If we just see that, if you give him 3.9 yards per carry, he's now a 1,000-yard rusher. And I can't see a reason not to draft a guy in the fifth/sixth round that's getting 260, plus carries a game. A game.
That'd be awesome.
A season.
Oh my god.
Like I said, I feel like last year was the worst it could be. Like I said,
Sure.
a lot of teams I'm buying in this year, the Steelers, them, I like the Jags as well. I feel like they all had a lot of the worst that could happen last year. And when in this year, especially when running back is drying up so much, you're just looking at a guy who's got everything you want. Carries, that's the big thing. We're not seeing those
Good
18,
size
19,
too.
yeah, good size. You're not seeing a running back anymore that's getting 20 carries a game, and we all know how valuable just a singular carry is. So if he can get that rushing touchdown total up to 7-8, which I think is completely doable if he just has a small increase. But I think this kid has talent, and we saw it in college when he was playing in Iowa. He's got game-breaking speed, and I don't know if you guys remember this clip when they played the Vikings, and he ran their whole offense, their whole defense, maybe even the whole bench from about the 10-15 into the end zone. The kid's got power in those legs. He has everything you want in a running back, but because of the unsexiness of his name, he's playing on the Bears with Trubisky. Like, everything is just like, it's a sour taste in your mouth, and I feel like people are getting down on this kid when he has everything aligning to make him pop in his second year.
No, I mean, I do agree with you to a certain extent. He's someone who I'm slowly talking my way into this guy. I wasn't a fan of him coming in just because I also owned him for a little bit last year in some leagues. He left a sour taste in my mouth. I'm talking my way into him because the Bears do believe in him, and Trubisky was someone who was supposed to take a step. He actually took a step backwards in his second year in the league.
Yep.
He was supposed to take a step forward. I think that bringing Foles in could serve as maybe as a boost for Trubisky if Trubisky's a competitor. And we could, if we see him get back to even just 2018 form, so his rookie year, I think that's good enough to make defenses respect the passing game, which should open lanes for Montgomery. Because the biggest issue with Montgomery right now is that the Bears didn't address their offensive line issues, and that the quarterback play is still suspect. So if they can't improve that, then it's still going to be 8 men in the box, and you can't run through a brick wall. But I mean, he's 5'10", 216, like a little bit taller, but very similar profile to Maurice Jones-Drew, as far as size and everything. I mean, he doesn't have the tree trunks for quads, but he's a powerful kid. He's fast. They clearly want to use him. If either of those quarterbacks can be good, he's going to be a bargain for people. So I do love the take.
Yeah, and you got to love that he, those 18 carries inside the 5-yard line, third most amongst running backs. Like I said, PFF did a stat on that. Of the with running backs with at least 17 carries inside the 5, averaged 8.6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So you got to love that. Like I said, it's just the volume. You can't find that volume unless you're paying for it in the first round. So I don't see why he has everything he needs to break out.
Sure.
Just plain and simple.
All right. So I'm going to talk about the first QB of the bunch. A guy that I tried to own in every league I could last year. Got him in some, didn't get him in others. Pretty happy I didn't get him in all of them because, honestly, his rookie season left something to be desired. Kyler Murray, 2019 stats, 3,700 yards, 541 attempts, 74.4% adjusted completion percentage, but only 20 touchdowns and 12 picks. He had like 500 yards in the ground too, so not a bad season for a rookie, but not what everyone was hoping from Kyler. The big knock on him though was the fact that he did only have that 3.7% touchdown percentage and a 1.7% touchdown rate in the end zone, or as far as end zone passing goes. Mm-hmm. So you guys know, end zone passing is typically in the 3s for most quarterbacks, or for most good quarterbacks. And the league average for just touchdown percentage in general is 4.7. So he was below average on both. If you just stat Kyler out, they take the exact same stat line for last year, but you give him 4.7, so you bring up to the league average. That brings him to 25 touchdowns. If he's 25 touchdowns and 12 picks last year, you are very happy with Kyler as a rookie. Now, you also have to factor in, while you're bringing him up to that level, we know Cliff Kingsbury wants to run a high-paced offense. Cliff Kingsbury was also a rookie coach last year. They brought him in specifically to coach Kyler. So I think that there was just a little bit of growing pains in that offense, personally, for me. I'm looking at it from the stance of Cliff Kingsbury is going into his second year in the NFL. He has another year under his belt, understanding how the offense works. And you did see him make second half adjustments last year that seemed to make the offense click better than it did in the first half. So I really like the direction the offense is going. Obviously, they brought in Kenyon Drake midseason last year, who is, at this point in his career, a much better running back than David Johnson is. And we're going to get to see a full season of that this year. And then there's obviously the massive offseason acquiring of DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, he's what most would consider easy top 3, probably the best wide receiver in football.
Hands like glue.
Yeah, hands like glue. I mean, even without an offseason to learn the offense, a guy like DeAndre Hopkins is only going to make it easier for Kyler to do his job, because he's not someone you could ignore as a defender. You have to pay attention to DeAndre Hopkins. I look at Kyler this year and I see someone who could easily finish with 4,400 yards, 28 touchdowns, and, bring those picks down a little bit as he learns how to be an NFL quarterback. I might bring it to like 10 or 9 maybe. If you were wondering where that would have put him, if he had done that last year, 600 in attempts would put him at 5th, which was Carson Wentz. 6th in yards would have 4,400 yards would put him at 6th, which was Wilson. And 28 touchdowns would have put him 5th at touchdowns, which was Breeze. For the most part, with the exception of Wentz, but that wasn't really Wentz's fault, you wouldn't be mad if you had any of those guys last year. So I think Kyler's a very safe quarterback who has awesome upside. One, because of how fast-paced that offense should be running, because he's a really good throwing talent. He has the 10th best arm in the league. And on top of that, he has the legs to do a lot on the ground too. So if you don't put a QB spy out there, or if the play breaks down, he can burn you with his legs. He could easily not do what Lamar did, but maybe a little bit of a flip of what Lamar did, where he is passing focused, but he then also brings in 600 or 700 on the ground. Maybe a bit more like vintage Cam Newton when he was coming out of his rookie year and he started just blowing up the league with his running. I love where he's going right now at ADP of 52.5, so early 6th round. ECR has him as the 5th best QB. The public's drafting him as the QB3, so they're clearly also sort of agreeing with my sentiment. I honestly believe that's a fair price. I could see myself taking him in that range if I don't like anyone else on the board, just because his ceiling is the one.
I was gonna say, so a little bit last video we talked about like where like you like to draft QBs. Like, are you comfortable taking Kyler there and like kind of?
So I did state the 5th is the earliest this year that I'm looking at quarterbacks, and the reason that I'm looking at him in that round is because that's where Kyler, Dak, and Russell are going. So yes, if everything broke that way, I could take Kyler in the 5th.
All right.
Yeah, fifth's a little bit expensive for me personally, but when I look at Kyler, I definitely see the talent. I see what they bought in. My issues are more that, once again, it's another one of those things where I look at last year and what happened. You look at, I feel like they're the Browns of this year, where the hype on this team is through the roof. So everyone's on them. They're driving up the ADP on all these guys, with the exception of Hopkins, who's slipping back to a point where he's slowly becoming a value, but we're not sure exactly how they're going to use him. I do agree, he is what you want for a fantasy quarterback, where he has the running ability, and he was able to take care of the football better than I think a lot of rookies can, that we've seen before. But with him, I'm half in, half out. I think the price is just a little bit too, I feel like we're already buying a Kyler that broke out as we look at the guys around him. Dak, who just put up his huge year. Russell, who's just year in, year out, threatens that top 3 for quarterbacks.
Sure.
So you're already paying a premium for a guy, and I think it's all because of the hype. So for me,
the hype train is in full motion for Kyler.
Oh yeah, like I said, I could see myself taking him in the 7th, maybe 6th if I'm feeling really good about my first 5 picks. But overall, he's probably going to be a guy I pass on just because I don't want to pay a 5th round where you can get some guys like David Montgomery, if you're crazy like him, AJ Brown.
And to be clear, I'm probably not going to be owning much Kyler because while the draft board have to be set up perfectly where there's no one I like for me to take a quarterback in the 5th. That is the absolute ceiling at which I would take a guy. I'm just saying, if you want to take Kyler in the 5th, I don't fault you for it because I think what he's going to give you this season is good enough that, especially if you draft it very well in the first 4 rounds, I can understand that. Or if you aren't a league where you have, because a lot of leagues don't have 3 wide receivers and a flex, whereas we do.
Mm-hmm.
If you aren't playing in a deeper league, maybe you only have 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers flex. I can see people taking Kyler there and it working well for them based on what he's going to return.
Mm-hmm.
I personally probably won't own much of him, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, just to wrap it up, with that question in mind, you're staring in the 5th round. Let's say you hate everyone that's on the board for some reason, and you're looking at Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson. Who are you taking?
Oh, Kyler. I shoot for the ceiling.
Okay.
I think they have similar floors, but I think Kyler has the better ceiling. Let's jump to Frankie again, who's going to enlighten us on Calvin Ridley. I know, a popular breakout across the community this year.
Yeah, I mean, everything's kind of just falling his way. It's kind of hard not to like Calvin Ridley. If you look at his first 2 years, I mean, he's eclipsed 800 yards in both of those years, and he's the number 2 behind Julio Jones. I mean, you guys know me in fantasy. I don't like wide receiver ones. That's just my style of play. I'm not saying if you take wide receiver ones, there's anything wrong with that. If you're going to not waste your draft pick. If you're going to spend your draft pick on a wide receiver one, and it's a good value, go for it. I just don't like wide receiver ones because they are often going to get shadowed by the best corner on the team.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to often draw double coverage.
Yep.
It's much safer, in my opinion, personal preference, to take a wide receiver 2. Calvin Ridley has always been that guy for me that I've always liked over these past 2 years, where it's the volume he gets, 92 targets, 93 targets his first 2 years in the league.
Sure.
And what he does with those I mean, last year was kind of a step back for him because obviously all the issues the Falcons had on the offensive line, but they were still throwing the ball out, which is why he got to those 93 targets and kept that kind of similar volume going.
Sure.
Does a lot with a little.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, 51 and 66 yards per game. Like, you're not mad about that. 10 touchdowns to 7 last year. I think that's also another part of, like, the Falcons, like, taking a step back as an organization and all the injuries. But I think this year it's like you have Todd Gurley coming in. You have the healthy offensive line. Matt Ryan,
it's sort of the stars are aligning for him.
Matt Ryan, even in a down year, we talked about this in the quarterback episode. Does anyone here not like Matt Ryan this year?
No, I'm fine. I like Matt Ryan where he's going. I think he's a great value at quarterback.
I was more speaking to, like,
Yeah, it's the up year for Matty Ice.
So I think that, like, Calvin Ridley's never had, like, that, like, drop off season in these past 2 years, but.
So you mentioned the double coverage thing. Calvin Ridley actually gets double covered a lot. Typically, teams don't put their best cornerback on a player and double cover them. But he's done well against double coverage, which speaks to his talent. I agree. I like Calvin Ridley this year. I think he's a great player to break out. And I sort of equate it to the Antonio Brown Juju years where you're going to be able to succeed if you have a receiver of that. If you're already a good receiver and you have a receiver of Antonio Brown or Julio Jones quality ahead of you on the depth chart, they're going to be drawing the looks. They're going to have the number one corner with the safety over the top. And it's going to open things up for you so that all you have to do is beat your coverage and you're going to be able to score points. Calvin has shown us he can do that. The Falcons are going to be throwing a lot because, once again, not a great defense. Steve Sarkisian's coaching for his job. Yeah, I like Ridley. I like where he's going. I think he's a very intriguing player who has a higher ceiling than I think a lot of the community gives him credit for, because one, Hooper's gone. Those targets have to go somewhere, and Julio can't take all of them. Hurst isn't going to take all of them. Gurley's not going to. Like, some of those targets are going to go to Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, I do like me some Calvin Ridley. He is, like I said, you seem to have a theme here of liking guys who do a lot with a little. The difference with him is he has everything else that I do like. Why I like Kenny G more than I like AJ Brown. He's done it now 2 years in a row of high touchdown volume. I mean, what is it, 18 touchdowns, 17 touchdowns in 19 games?
Yeah, 17.
Yeah, he has produced touchdowns at an alarming rate. He does, like I said, he does a lot with a little, and he's on a team that wants to throw, and their defense isn't that great. So when I look at everything there, I would have the third-year breakout, second-year, third-year breakout. That's about when wide receivers pop. And like I said, he does have Julio Jones to not only mentor him, because they do have a similar style. They are down-the-field receivers, and Julio is one of the better guys in the league. I would argue he is the best receiver in the league.
I think he's the most talented receiver.
Just overall talent receiver. So that's all going to aid him. And I would be in on the Calvin Ridley train. I'm probably not going to get him because I feel like his ADP is going to slip up as we get close to kickoff.
Yeah, he's already high fourth.
Yeah,
so.
Big thing to say though is like.
Well, so actually we are running tight on time, so let's jump to Julock here.
All right,
Al, if you want to take us away with him.
Yeah. So Drew, he's a guy that we've all expressed a lot of interest in. He only showed us starting in week, I believe it is 13, only playing 4 games.
Sure.
Was able to eclipse 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He did play safe with the ball, had a very short depth of target, which I think is more of a first 4 games in the league, him being protective with the ball. But when you looked at him in college, he was making very pinpoint pro-style throws into tight windows, throwing guys open. And I think that the Broncos nailed this pick, and I think they were very smart with putting a veteran in front of him and letting the veteran take the punishment for the poor season that the Broncos had. And then on top of that,
Flacco was not great last year.
Yeah, no. They were not, and there were already weapons in that system. Fant, Sutton, now they added Melvin Gordon, Judy. There's just so many weapons around this kid. I feel like it's basically the Broncos have put a system around this kid that says, all right, we've got your supporting cast. It's up to you to sink or swim.
Yeah. Nut up or shut up.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're going to see that depth of target increase, and that's going to be a benefit to Cortland Sutton, who's a great down the field receiver. Judy's probably going to be playing out of the slot with, I forget his name, Harris, I believe, on the inside, but their other slot receiver. So those guys all together, plus Fant, plus Melvin Gordon, plus Philip Lindsay, all these guys together are going to be able to help this kid produce the best season he can. So that, on top of all of how cheap he is, I am very in on Drew Lock. If I don't get some kind of steal like a 7th round Russell Wilson or something like that, I just don't see where there's any risk in this player, and I see a lot of talent. I really liked. He was one of the bigger quarterbacks I liked coming out of the draft.
Sure.
And I think he landed in a great spot.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing to add there. I agree with you. I think that Drew Lock is a fantastic value at where he's going, and if he doesn't work out, boo-hoo, you cut him, you find someone else.
Yeah.
Jump into Hollywood Brown here is my next player. Going back to that wide receiver going a few rounds later. He's someone who he didn't have the best 2019 season, which actually is probably going to be a shock to some people because he was very hyped. He was that big week 1 waiver ad,
1st round draft pick.
Yeah, and he doesn't seem to really have caught much stink because of his bad year. And honestly, I think the reason why, and a big reason why I love Hollywood as a breakout, obviously, high draft pedigree, and he did have that Liz Frank injury last year, which bothered him all year.
Yeah, having a screw in your foot is going to make things hard.
Yeah, he had that screw taken out off season. He had surgery done to get the screw removed. He's reportedly doing well with his rehab. I mean, Greg Roman is singing his praises over there, saying he's had a great offseason physically. And on top of that, I just don't believe it's possible that the Ravens are going to have the absurdly low passing volume that they had last year, where they literally were the lowest passing volume in the league as far as teams went.
Yeah.
It's well known that rookie wide receivers generally don't have the best of years anyway. He's healthy this year. It's another year with the offense. Lamar clearly likes to throw to him. And the Ravens have nowhere. Literally, they're the bottom of the league. They have nowhere to go but up. I have him getting 94 targets, 68 receptions, 813 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He's going to be frustrating to own at times because he is going to be a feast or famine wide receiver, I think. Someone who could score you 2 touchdowns in one game and 2 yards the next game. But he's going to be someone who, if you can draft deep at wide receiver and get some nice safe guys to start with, he's a great wide receiver 3 to own because he can literally win you a week. I love him where he's going. Wide receiver 32. ADP has him at 31, middle of the 6th round. He's someone who I'm a big fan of, especially, like I said, especially if you can get guys like DJ Moore, Adam Thielen a couple rounds earlier.
Yeah. When I look at him, he was actually a guy I was going to talk about for a breakout candidate. I really like this kid for 2 reasons. One, he's not really fighting with anyone for wide receiver targets. It's just him and Mark Andrews going for those targets.
Yeah.
They're not throwing the ball to Mark Ingram. And Lamar, we've seen, like I said, the big knock on him.
Willie Snead.
No, yeah. Sorry. Cancel the breakout. Willie
Need
Snead.
for Snead.
Yeah. When you look at Lamar, with the first knock coming out of his rookie year is he's a running back. He can't pass. He's inaccurate. And he showed us last year he made great steps forward with his accuracy, not turning the ball over. And we saw this kid's work ethic, and that's why he ended up being the MVP.
Yeah.
And I also think that offense just gelled so well, and I think they have great I know they have great coaching. So all that together, I expect Lamar to take a step forward. I do expect his running to come down, which I think is only a benefit to Hollywood. And I know it's like the worst thing to do is I've seen some of the hype videos, some of those footwork drills.
Sure.
I bought in on him a little bit. Yeah, I can't.
He's
can't
got quick
lie.
feet.
He's got good feet.
Yeah, I mean, like if Lamar gets better, I agree. It's gonna be good for Hollywood. Speaking of a quarterback who also should be improving, Frankie, take us to Danny Dimes. I know you love yourself some dimes this season.
Listen, I don't love Danny Dimes. I don't like
him.
I don't like the Giants at all.
You send him love letters regularly.
Disclaimer: I don't like the Giants at all.
Frankie's also a Giants fan.
Yeah, it's Eagles, Giants, Cowboys.
Eagles, Giants, formerly Redskins, Cowboys.
Irregardless, Danny, like that whole Giants offense, this is kind of the reason why I'm on the whole Danny Dimes train. It's like, I mean, you're going to get him late if you take him. Like, I'm taking him as, like, my backup to, say, like, my Baker or my other late-round quarterback. But, I mean, last year, 24-12, not the greatest touchdown-interception ratio.
I mean, 24-12 is respectable.
Especially for a rookie.
It's like for a rookie.
Killed
For a
them
rookie,
with the fumbles.
for a rookie, that's not bad. But the fumbles are the main issue that I think that he needs to work out. If he can't work them out, don't hold onto the ball as long. Still at almost a 62% completion percentage. Threw for almost as many yards as Lamar did. Granted, they did throw the ball 50 more times.
Sure.
But I think he's got a healthy Saquon this year. He's got Golden Tate, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard. While they're not the sexy name receivers, they're still good receivers. If they all manage to stay healthy, I don't see why Danny Dimes can't vault into a top 10 position. I'm not going to say they're going to be the Kansas City Chiefs or the Atlanta Falcons, but they can be a top. I would say their ceiling's probably a top 5 offense.
While I disagree with your assessment of the ceiling of the offense, I do think that Danny could be a benefit to fantasy owners this year. He is someone who's going very late, so he's easy to get in drafts. And none of his receivers are going to be fun to own because it's going to be a thing where you never know who's going to pop on a week-to-week basis until we start to really get a look at who he's throwing to. Like, we're going to have to learn how that offense functions. You know, that we can make some inferences, but it's going to be nothing's set in stone, obviously, to actually see it. He does have a nice ceiling, though. He's got a lot of good weapons out on that team. He's got 3 wide receiver 2s. He's got Evan Ingram. He's got Saquon Barkley. If he can solve the fumbling and stop stopping drives as putting the ball on the ground, they could easily be at least a top half offense, I would say.
Yeah,
I do say he has a pretty rough schedule though.
Yeah,
but I also don't care about strength of schedule this early in the year.
Yeah, because we don't know where defense is going to end up. But just my little quick blurb on him is, with the 18 turnovers, with the 12 interceptions, with all those turnovers, he still almost broke the rookie record, and he didn't even play a full season. I think there's something special there that we're not seeing yet, and he has a very safe supporting cast. So I think everything he's got what he needs to.
They're talented players.
Yeah.
All right. So for someone who's a little bit riskier in terms of what they can give you, why don't you tell us about Mecole Hardman? Why you think he's a breakout guy?
Yeah. So I can almost repeat exactly what Frankie was talking about with his love of A.J. Brown, who is a much more expensive receiver. Mecole Hardman, I've seen him going as late as the 10th round sometimes.
So like twice as cheap.
Exactly, twice as cheap.
Yeah,
twice as
honestly,
cheap,
maybe even more.
and even I would say even more than doubly better offense. As you said,
doubly better.
more than doubly better. Like we have always been preaching, you want a piece of the Kansas City offense, and the only person sitting in front of him is Sammy Watkins, who almost retired this year or took a year off from football. It all seems like he's going to play, but I'm sure the coaching staff isn't too invested in a guy who is ready to just kind of hang it up for a year to study, the lizard men under the ground and
He did kind of have the dropsies too, and regularly let that offense down. So
right,
and fantasy owners.
Like I said, he's a guy. We know what he is. I think he's got talent, not the talent that his draft capital showed, and that happens all the time. Laquan Treadwell, guys like that. But
That's a name.
He's a guy who, as Frankie likes to point out, receivers, they do a lot with a little. He only got, so this is adjusted for when Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Mecole Hardman were all on the field at the same time, and Travis Kelce. He got 2% target share. He still turned in 500 yards and 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So, talk about doing a lot with a little. This kid he was the talk of the draft, in the same draft as Hollywood Brown, when he showed that breakaway speed. So, he is exactly what the Chiefs want.
He's quick.
He's fast.
Yep.
He's like a cheetah out there.
That's Tyreek Hill.
He can also be a cheetah. They got 2 cheetahs.
Going back to Calvin Ridley, another guy doing a lot with a little. He's got an amazing receiver across from him who, without the adjusted targets, Tyreek was getting about 16% of the targets to Mecole's actual 7%.
Yeah.
So a guy with double that, and he's going in the first round. And this, like I said, you want a piece of this offense. So I just see him taking a small step forward, jumping into maybe 10%.
Sure.
easy wide receiver 3, potential wide receiver 2 upside.
Well, I agree. I love it. But I love it based on just the fact that, like you said, it's an easy way to buy into the Chiefs' offense, and if it works out big.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't, then
Yeah, you cut him and you move on.
Yeah, second round talent. Like I said, he's just so cheap, and people are overlooking him. Yet they're all on the hype train on AJ Brown, Calvin Ridley, who I'm more in on Calvin Ridley than the people, but it's just he's the cheap version if you want to go for the gamble wide receivers.
All right, so I'll take us away with the last player here. And I'm going to be talking about a guy who I am in love with this season. I am going to try and own him everywhere that I can. Mr. TJ Hawkinson, drafted 8th overall by the Detroit Lions. Only played in 12 games. He did have a season-ending injury. Started 7 of them. 59 targets, 32 receptions, 367 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to address the elephant in the room for him first. He was bad in 2019. He had the one really good game.
Yep.
6 for 9. 131 and a touchdown.
And I traded him away for a lion's share.
And everyone bought in on him. They should have been buying in on Waller because he was out there at that time also. They didn't. And Hawkinson burned him the rest of the year. And you know what? Shame on fantasy owners for expecting a rookie tight end to do as well as they expected him to do. We all know rookie tight ends take a while to succeed. You know what Hawk was good at? Blocking. He was also, per fantasy data, he was also on the field for 69.2% of the snaps, which is huge for someone, especially for someone who was dropping a lot of balls. He was not making good plays out there, but he was one of the top-rated prospects in his draft class. The Lions agreed, and he was the top-rated tight end.
I would hope the Lions.
His skills were excellent blocker, excellent route runner, good hands. I believe that he is going to solve that dropping issue, and if he can start reeling in those passes, if he can get back to what he was in college, with a healthy Stafford back there playing a full 16 games, if we just project him out over those 16 games, he gets 79 targets. I have him getting 92 targets, 50 catches, 620 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And honestly, the ceiling for him, especially given how volatile tight ends is, maybe he falls into the end zone for 4 more touchdowns than that. All of a sudden, we're talking about him in the top 5 of tight ends. He was also 4th in targets behind Golladay and Jones and Danny Dimes, I believe, last year. Danny Amendola last year. Yeah. He's a guy who they believed in. They tried to target him. They can't force the ball into his hand. But he's a year older now. He's got Stafford back. I've already gone over where the Lions are going to throw. And best part of all, he's currently going as the tight end 15 off the board at the 138th pick. That's the middle of the 11th. ECR has him as tight end 15 as well. So if he does flop for you, if it turns out that he's just a bad prospect and doesn't work out, oh no, you wasted an 11th round pick. You go find a different tight end. I love the upside that you get for basically no cost. It's like the Mecole Hardman argument.
Yeah, I think the big thing with him that even though he had the dropsies in a major way, those were the dropsies coming from David Blow. Not Stafford as much.
Well, some of it was Stafford, but he didn't get a lot of, aside from week 1, he didn't get a lot of volume from Stafford.
Right.
Until later in the season when it was Blow and Driscoll.
Right. So I also love that even though he was having those catching problems, they kept feeding this kid the rock until he got injured. Yeah. Like, you love to see a team committed to using a tight end like that because it's rare, especially for tight ends with how shallow and volatile that position could be. I am also all in on that breakout.
He's someone who you look at who he's going around. Jaceki, Jonnu Smith, Austin Hooper is going 2 rounds earlier. Hayden Hurst is in that range. Rob Gronkowski, and it's like, wouldn't you rather tie yourself to the guy who's going to be in that offense that they have to throw a lot and there's not a lot of people to throw to, and who has that high draft pedigree, rather than an Irv Smith or an Ian Thomas or a Jonnu, where none of them are in throwing offenses and none of them are at the top of their target tree. I don't see any reason to not draft Hawkinson. If you miss, unless someone just beats you to him, if you miss out on Hawkinson and he blows up this season, I'm just gonna say I told you so now.
Yeah, so depending on how my draft turns out, I mean, he's probably gonna be my backup tight end. Hopefully, if it pans out like that. I do think that the one thing to say is,
Frank, I'll stop you because it won't pan out like that. I'll beat you to him.
if he's going the 11th, you're picking before me. So yeah, you're good. It's fine.
You know what you do? You pick him in the 10th before he gets his 11th round pick.
No, I'm gonna get my 5th running back.
That's what, I guess that's one thing I think you should look at is if you really like a guy like me, I'm probably gonna if I'm in a position to take Mecole Hardman, I might just grab him around earlier because a ninth round pick is still not that expensive for a guy like that. If you really believe in one of these late round tight ends or late round just guys who have upside, spend right at their ADP,
Take your shot.
Yeah.
or take them around early. Make sure
I
you
agree
secure
with that.
Yeah, don't try and get cheeky this late in the draft and wait on these guys. Take your shot if you believe in them because if they do well, then it's gonna pay off.
Yeah, otherwise you're gonna have to be riding that will Chris Herndon finally break out bus. It's not a fun bus to be on.
It is not. Let's do a beer check, guys.
Not me.
What are you on for?
Yes.
It's hard to tell because I'm right here, but you know what? I had it last week. I'm gonna give you the 4 this week.
So I think if you're like a little bit of the middle of the can, then I'm ahead of you anyway. So
He's got a bulb.
We'll agree to disagree, but
all right. So I have the floor, and you know what? Just to continue my Hawkinson love, I'm going to rant about tight ends for a little bit here because it's always been a strategy of mine to take a tight end late. I never draft tight end. Oftentimes, because this isn't a requirement in our league, I have not drafted a tight end before. I'll use those end of my roster spots to take extra dart throws at players that I think could do something. Like a Mecole Hardman of last year, where they really weren't getting drafted in a lot of leagues. You don't draft a defense, you don't draft a tight end, you don't draft a kicker if you still use kickers, and you use those extra end of the roster spots at dart throws. You wait to see what happens, see if they make the roster, and you go from there. This is a year where I'm going to be drafting a tight end. I'm not going to just let that run through the draft. And I love the guys that are going 9th and later, because unlike most years where I just look at that, I'm I like 2 of them, I guess. It's fine, but I'm not happy. I'm thrilled to be in that range. I think you're a bozo if you're drafting earlier than that, because while, yes, Kelsey and Kittle and Andrews have the sexy name and they get all the targets and the touchdowns, you are sacrificing those good players earlier in the draft. And we all know tight end is volatile. And there's so many good young tight ends with good draft pedigree and good profiles who could end up in that top 5 very easily, like a Gesicki, who was drafted basically like TJ Hawkinson was, but unfortunately he was playing under Adam Gase for many years. Or like Jonnu Smith, who now has Ryan Tannehill, who's been using him correctly, and he's getting a little bit older. Or like my boy Hawkinson here, like Hayden Hurst is now in LA. There's just so many guys in that range, all of whom could just explode on your roster and return all this value. It's they're not going to be Travis Kelce, but they could be close enough that it really doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, you got yours in the 11th, they got theirs in the 2nd. Who's winning here? That's all I gotta say. Just don't fall into the trap. This often it's not always this case, but this year specifically, don't fall into the trap of drafting a tight end in the top 4 rounds. You'll hate yourself.
I will agree to disagree.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode, folks. We will see you guys on Monday as we bring you another hot best ball episode, I believe, coming this week, where we see what's changed since the last one, and we'll see who wins.
See you later.
It's going to be me again. Plot twist.